Chapter 6. Saliva, Sperm, and Sequencing. It started innocently enough. Elias had been sitting at a cafe in Kaadu, nursing a beaker and reviewing network logs on his tablet when she approached with a clipboard and a bright, rehearsed smile. "Hi. Sorry to bother you, sir. Can I ask if you've ever had your DNA sequenced?" He looked up. She was young, mid-20s at most, with sharp features, red lipstick, and dark curls tied in a loose bun. Corporate labeled lanyard. White sneakers. Bright eyes. Elias gave a lopsided grin. "That's the best pickup line I've heard all week." She laughed. "It's not a pickup line. Though, it does get reactions. I work for GeneU, a genetic ancestry and health analysis company. We're running a campaign on next-gen sequencing models. If you volunteer a sample, saliva, or other, you get free health data and access to experimental future match studies." He arched a brow. Future match. She took the seat across from him before he could say no. Bold. She handed him a glossy pamphlet. "We run comparative genome analysis, see how your markers align with potential matches. Compatibility, ancestral traits, even what your hypothetical child might look like." He raised an eyebrow. "And people fall for that." "Oh, you'd be surprised. The dating world's brutal. Everyone's looking for certainty, even if it comes from a lab." He chuckled. "Saliva's easy. But you said mother, you mean sperm." She didn't blink. "We test for reproductive health, motility, and certain epigenetic markers. It's all part of our male contribution sequence. Most men don't go that far. Most men aren't me." "I can tell," she said with a little smirk. There was a beat. She tapped her pen against the clipboard. "Tell you what, Mr. Elias." "Elias," she repeated, liking the sound of it. "If you're really not like most men, let's make a deal. You give me both samples, we run the full profile, and I'll include mine too. We can see what the Elias hypothetical baby might look like. Just for science." He tilted his head, studying her. "Do you make that offer to all your test subjects?" She grinned. "Only the stocky older ones who look like they have dark secrets and stable bank accounts." He laughed, full-bodied. "You know how to sell." "I do marketing," she said, standing and sliding her card across the table. "You can come by our lab, or we can arrange something a little more relaxed." Later that evening, Elias' apartment. The wine was opened. Her name was Lucia, half Angolan, half Portuguese, raised in Porto, moved to Lisbon last year for the biotech startup boom. "I still can't believe you agreed to the sperm sample," she teased as she pulled out a small sealed collection kit from her leather bag. "Most men freeze up the second I say it." Elias, shirt open, leaned back on the sofa, swirling his wine. "I'm too old to be shy, Lucia. Besides, you're the first woman who ever flirted with me using genome compatibility." She set the kit on the table and raised her glass. "To data-driven desire." They clinked. They filled out the form together, laughing over the questions. "Do you have a family history of genetic disorders?" she read aloud. "Only madness," Elias replied. "And a tendency to fall for trouble." "Noted," she said, scribbling something. She took her own saliva sample and sealed it while he disappeared briefly into the bathroom with the other kit. When he returned, she held up the barcode scanner, pretending to be very professional. Subject 12B, sample received. "Let's hope you're fertile." "Oh, I'm fertile." She raised an eyebrow. "That's so." He walked over and took the scanner from her hand. "You'll have to verify the results." She didn't stop him when he leaned down and kissed her. The morning after. The DNA kit sat in their sealed boxes on the counter. Lucia lay half-wrapped in a linen sheet, tracing the symbol on his chest with her finger, unaware of its deeper meaning. "So, think we'll make a beautiful baby?" she asked with a teasing grin. Elias looked at the morning light filtering through the window. Lisbon felt different. The air hummed. "Maybe," he murmured. "But I'm more curious about what we'll awaken." She didn't understand the answer. Not yet. But her hand found his under the covers anyway. They had already passed the point of no return. Elias Moreau's dream of awakening. He dreamed of the sea again, or was it the first time? But this seems like this has happened, a dream hidden deep down. Is this a déjà vu? No, this time something else is different. This was more lucid, more real. It was as if he was always awake. What is the reality now? But this time, it was boiling. The seas, are they disappearing? The waves churned not with water, but with black steam and molten foam. The horizon was warped, as if the world itself were recoiling. Elias stood barefoot on a shore that did not exist on any map, the liminal place beyond time, where stone felt like bone and the wind whispered in extinct languages. Above him, the sky split open in veins of bleeding gold. The stars screamed. Not metaphorically, he heard them, shrieking like dying animals as the constellations twisted in the firmament. The archer snapped his bow. The lion devoured its own tail. And Pisces, the two eternal fish, thrashed in the shallows, bound together by a silver cord that shimmered like moonlight stretched thin. Then came the god. Above, the hidden one, that looked like dying but always living. Not as a carving. Not as an image in a textbook or etched on the walls of forgotten shrines. No, alive. Colossal. Terrible. Divine. His skin was the color of hammered gold, radiant yet cold, and his eyes were suns trapped in human sockets, burning with the fury of things older than light. In one hand, he held a dagger, its hilt shaped like a rising flame. In the other, a chain made of something darker than iron, older than sin. He stepped into the sea. The fish, bound in their sacred symmetry, the sign of peace, of Christ, of the age Elias had trusted, began to writhe, sensing what was to come. But Mithra did not hesitate. He raised the dagger high and brought it down with a motion both fluid and final. The silver cord snapped. The sea screamed. Red flooded the waves. The fish fell apart, torn from one another, their unity broken. The sky above fractured again, and the stars fell like ash into the sea, swallowed by boiling black. Elias awoke with a gasp, salt on his lips, his sheets drenched in sweat. It wasn't the first time. For weeks now, the dream had returned, growing more vivid, more detailed, more demanding. Each night it added something new, a sound, a symbol, a face in the crowd. And each morning, Elias found himself unable to let it go. He had drawn it compulsively, pages filled with furious sketches of celestial waters, of the flaming dagger, of a god who offered no comfort, no absolution. And today, something was different. The room was still. Morning light bled in through the shuttered windows of his apartment in Lisbon. But the air felt charged, like the moment before a storm, when everything holds its breath. He shuffled into the bathroom, still half dreaming, and froze. In the mirror, his pupils were ringed with gold, a thin, unmistakable halo around each iris, like the corona of an eclipse. He blinked. Rubbed his eyes. Leaned closer. It didn't go away. And there, on his chest, above the sternum, burned into the flesh like a scar from a brand, was a mark he had no memory of making. Not a cross. Not a crescent. A flame. Shaped into a 7-point star, each point curling like a petal, radiating heat though the skin was cool to the touch. He reached up, half in fear, half in awe, and pressed his fingers against it. The mirror cracked. A single jagged line split his reflection from brow to jaw, like a fault line. Elias staggered back. The golden rings in his eyes flickered. Somewhere deep inside his chest, something ancient stirred, a whisper of flame, a syllable of a forgotten name. He didn't know what was happening to him. Only that reason no longer held the high ground. And the part of his mind that used to scoff at myth, at gods, at sacred destinies. That part was dying. The dream beneath the mountain. Lisbon. Midnight. The night after the vision of the sea and the silver cord. Elias Moreau couldn't sleep. The golden rings in his eyes hadn't faded. The mark on his chest, a 7-point flame, ached with a quiet, rhythmic pulse. He felt like a tuning fork that had been struck, still vibrating with sound long after the blow. The city murmured beyond his windows, trams groaning, glass clinking in distant bars, lovers laughing in alleyways. But in his apartment, there was only silence. And then, without transition, the dream began. He stood in the ancient valley again. Not from memory, but from something deeper. Something ancestral. The hills were low and dry, covered in cork trees and scrub. The air smelled of ash and rosemary. Cicadas buzzed like hidden voices. Ahead of him, carved into the flank of a sloping mountain, yawned the entrance to a cave. Its mouth was black and wide, breathing cool air. The stones surrounding it were covered in markings, some scratched, some painted, spirals, antlers, flame-like stars. It felt familiar. Like coming home to a place he had never been. He stepped inside. The deeper he went, the more the cave seemed to expand, not just in space, but in meaning. The walls flickered with shapes not lit by flame, but by memory. Symbols twisted between recognizable and impossible, bull heads, circles within circles, hands with 7 fingers. At the center, he found the altar. A stone slab, ancient and worn smooth by centuries of touch. Bones lay around it, not scattered, but arranged, reverent. Human. Animal. Spirit. And beside the altar, seated like a statue come to life, was the god. Endovelicus. He knew the name as soon as he saw him. Horned. Cloaked in wolf pelts. His eyes glowed not with flame, but with the dark warmth of the earth, gold, but subterranean. A healing light. A knowing gaze. The god watched Elias as one might observe a sleeping child beginning to stir. Elias dropped to one knee. Not from reverence, yet, but from instinct. And as he knelt, the cave began to speak. Not with a voice. Not in words. But in remembering. He saw people gathered by fire, their faces painted with ash and ochre. He saw blood spilled over sacred stones, not in cruelty, but in rhythm, sacrificed to maintain balance. He saw women chewing herbs, whispering dreams. He saw priests standing at cave mouths, waiting for visions from the underworld. And he saw something else. Something beyond. A presence. Not Endovelicus. Not of the earth. Above. Before. Behind. The light changed. The stone altar cracked. The god of the mountain turned his head, slowly, not toward Elias, but away, toward a shadow beyond the flame. And that was when he felt it. A presence descending, like a storm from the stars. The air became fire. The roots of the cave twisted. The dream itself began to bleed. And he stepped forward. Not Endovelicus. Not a Roman deity. Not Persian. Not from any myth Elias had read or taught or mocked in lecture halls. Just a presence. Vast. Bright. Terrible. A figure that flickered like flame and golden starlight, yet held the weight of eternity in its silence. It bore a dagger with a flame-shaped hilt. In the other hand, a chain made of starlight and sorrow. Where it walked, the stone glowed. Elias could not see its face. Not really. Every time he looked, it changed: man, beast, shadow, star. But he knew its nature. And though no name formed on his lips, he heard one thing echoed in his mind. The Hidden One. It did not speak. But the silence was deafening. The god Endovelicus bowed his head. And the cave, the earth, the air recognized this being. Not foreign. Not enemy. But source. Origin. Ancestor of fire and judgment. Bringer of contracts. Divider of light and darkness. Elias opened his mouth, but no sound came. He saw the Hidden One lift the dagger high. A bull, not real, but carved into the air like a constellation, appeared before him. 3 blades pierced it, and stars rained down. The altar blazed into golden fire. The flame mark on Elias's chest burned like iron. "You have remembered," the voice said, not aloud, not outside. It was the Hidden One. Inside him. Beneath him. Before him. You are not a prophet. You are a fracture. You will carry what was severed. I have worn many masks. You will help me shed them. Begin again. The cave collapsed into fire. Elias awoke on the floor of his apartment. His mouth was dry. His skin slick with sweat. The mark on his chest had grown. Around the 7 points flame, new lines had appeared, twisting outward like roots, or rays, or branches of an unseen tree. He looked in the mirror. The golden rings in his eyes had darkened into something stranger, like eclipses. And behind his reflection, for just a heartbeat. A shadow. A crown. A flame. He turned, but the room was empty. Still, he whispered, without knowing why. The Hidden One. I know you now. Even if I cannot name you. He felt no comfort. Only gravity. As if something ancient had begun to move beneath his feet, and he, Elias Moreau, historian, skeptic, dreamer, had become its first crack in the waking world. Lisbon docks, 2 hours later. The streets of Lisbon blurred. Elias didn't remember leaving his apartment. One moment, he stood before the mirror, eyes ringed in eclipse, heart hammering from the fading dream, and the next, he was walking. Or rather, being walked, as if his body had become a vessel, compelled by tides older than thought. The city's cobbled veins unfurled beneath his feet like a living map. Street lamps flickered as he passed, their orange halos bending away from him. The Alfama was silent. Even the drunks and tourists were absent, as if something in the air had sent the world into hiding. He passed tiled facades and salt-worn statues, stray cats darting into shadows. A priest walked by with averted eyes, whispering a prayer in Latin under his breath. No one looked directly at him. The dream still pulsed behind his vision. The cave. The god. The voice of the Hidden One. And now, another sensation, a pull, like gravity reversed, calling him not to the sky but to the sea. He came to the docks without knowing the route. The sky above was the color of bruised brass. Clouds churned like ink spilled in water. The moon hung low, bloated, orange like flame behind fog. Ships groaned against their moorings. Seagulls wheeled but did not cry. Elias stood at the edge of the crumbling seawall, his coat whipping around him, salt and wind stinging his face. The sea was black. But beneath it, something stirred. Not waves. Not fish. Something deeper. He could feel it now, not metaphorically, not poetically, but viscerally, as if the Atlantic itself was only a skin stretched over a vast awakening muscle. He wasn't religious. Not anymore. Not since the seminary had cast him out. Not since he'd seen what was buried beneath Qumran, those broken scrolls, the inverted script, the altar shaped like a bull's head. Faith had once lived in him like a seed. But that seed had been burned. And yet here he was, drawn to the edge of the world, to the meeting of land and sea and sky, where gods once walked. He reached into his coat. The leather-bound book. It had belonged to his father. A gift. A curse. A legacy wrapped in silence. Bound in cracked hide, older than modern publishing, smelling of cedar and desert wind. Its pages were stitched from lambskin, the ink faded, except for certain places where the words looked as though they had been written yesterday or tomorrow. The language was impossible. A shifting amalgam of Greek, Persian, Aramaic, an impossible tongue that refused to be pinned down. His father had once joked that it was a scholar's nightmare and a prophet's journal. He flipped through until he found the last page. Last night, it had been blank. Now? The ink had changed overnight. Still wet, as though freshly written. The age of the fish has ended. The flame returns. Elias exhaled sharply, as though punched in the chest. His hand trembled. The phrase throbbed with power. As if language had been waiting, for someone to see it, to remember. Behind him, footsteps echoed. He didn't flinch. Didn't need to turn to know he was not alone. A presence emerged from the shadows between stacked cargo containers. The figure moved like a thought-given form, deliberate, sharp, silent. A long black coat. No face visible beneath the brim of the hat, only a glint of something reflective. The man stopped 5 paces behind him. "We've been watching you, Elias," he said, his voice calm, accented with something old and unplaceable, like it belonged to a forgotten dialect. Elias didn't turn right away. He kept his eyes on the sea. On the unknowable thing beneath it. On the words that glowed in the book like embers. Then he spoke. "Then you know I'm not running." There was a pause. And then, a nod in the voice. "No. You're waking. And the world is terrified of what you might remember." Something shifted in Elias's chest. Not fear. Not hope. Recognition. He finally turned. The man in the coat watched him with eyes that reflected fire, though there was no flame nearby. In his gloved hand, he held something, small, metallic. A coin. Old. Roman? No. Older. The man stepped forward and held it out. Elias took it. The coin was cold. On one side, the faint outline of a bull being pierced. On the other, a flame in the shape of a 7-point star, the same as his mark. He looked up. But the man was gone. As if he had never been there. Only the coin remained. Only the wind. Only the sea, boiling quietly beneath the surface. And Elias, now utterly awake, standing on the threshold of something so vast it made history itself feel like a footnote. He looked again at the coin, the book, the sea. And whispered, not to the man, not to the god, but to the thing rising inside him. "I remember. I remember the hidden one. Lisbon, years ago, the first turning. She was older, elegant in the way only Portuguese women of a certain generation could be, sun-bronzed skin, wine-dark eyes, lips that curved like they held secrets from the age of sail. Her name was Isabel, and she was the daughter of his father's old acquaintance, a fish broker who had once owned half the docks in Setúbal. Elias had just turned 19. He'd been helping out that summer, patching nets, running deliveries, learning the family trade. One sweltering afternoon, Isabel had driven down from Lisbon in a white BMW, her sunglasses catching the sun like knives. She watched him haul crates from the pier with an amused tilt of her head. "You're not a boy anymore," she said, handing him a cold beer without being asked. "Your father didn't tell me you filled out." The first time it happened was in her apartment above the harbor. Salt on their lips. Cigarette smoke curling like ghosts. He remembered thinking, as her dress fell to the floor, "This is not what love feels like, but it's something. She was the first of many. The pattern begins. Isabel came and went that summer, and so did Elias, back to his books, his new life in Lisbon, but he carried that experience like a scar that never hurt. He never asked her to stay, and she never expected him to. That was the lesson. That pleasure and closeness could be real, but intimacy, commitment, was negotiable. At university, Elias was smart enough to ace network security classes but aloof enough to keep most friendships superficial. He paid his way through school with odd jobs, tutoring, fixing busted systems, even working night shifts at server farms. But there was always a woman, sometimes two, waiting in the wings. It started with fellow students. Then teaching assistants. Then it moved to wealthy widows, benefactors of the university or local art patrons who liked the way he listened, the way he smiled without giving too much away. He learned how to dress sharp on a budget, how to touch with reverence, how to disappear before dawn with nothing left behind but heat and perfume. He never promised anything. He never had to. After graduation, when he landed his first IT job, a mid-level security analyst for a Lisbon bank, he'd already earned a reputation, Elias Moreau. Charming. Keeps to himself. Hands like a thief, voice like late-night radio. He rented a modern flat near Alfama, filled it with books, vinyl records, and nothing sentimental. He worked by day and drifted by night, bars, galleries, lounges, places where women drank alone and men spoke in low, calculating voices. He told himself it was freedom. No one to answer to. No obligations. If his sheets were never cold, neither was his heart. But over time, the rhythm dulled. There were years where it slowed, dry spells, real ones. The city lost its thrill. His job plateaued. He found himself spending more time back at home, back at sea, relearning tides and sonar and quotas with his cousins. And yet even there, even on the docks, widows and divorced mothers noticed him. He'd join them for lunch, maybe wine, and by evening he'd be watching the moonlight off someone else's balcony. Now. He had lived that way for over 2 decades. He had lovers. Never enemies. Never anything serious. Because somewhere beneath the charm, behind the casual sex and cigarettes and long night drives, Elias Moreau had decided, long ago, that he was better alone. That love was something other people believed in. But now? Now he stood at the Lisbon docks with a mark on his chest that burned through cloth and memory. Now he dreamed of gods. Now he feared he had never really been alone at all. His life was not dull, not at all a bachelor life, the girls, the night life, and among them he remembered the most. What the water didn't teach him. Setúbal, summer before university. Elias had just turned 18 when he met Isabel Lobo, the youngest daughter of his father's old acquaintance who was working as a security clerk of his father's friend's sardine canning and fishing company that became a seafood exporter. She had just returned from Lisbon, fresh off a modeling stint, confident, amused by the dull pace of her coastal hometown. Well, they were more of the same age. She wasn't that pretty, but sexy enough to be a model. She caught him fixing an old net under the boat shed one afternoon. "You're Domingos Moreau's son?" she asked, hands on her hips, sunglasses propped on her head like a crown. Elias wiped the sweat from his brow and nodded. "And you're Isabel? You remember me?" "Barely," he said. "You were the spoiled girl who hated fish." She smiled at that. "Still do." They started seeing each other under lazy stars and fig trees. It began as flirtation, sharpened into hunger. Isabel was older by 4 years, worldlier, and didn't pretend romance. One evening, under the heavy shade of his father's unused boathouse, it happened. After the first time. "Did it hurt?" he asked, not sure what else to say. Isabel laughed, still panting. She was no virgin though, she just wanted to French kiss the guy and keep practicing on it. What are you, a Catholic schoolboy? Until this morning, yes. She reached for her cigarette and lit it with one hand, the other still draped over his stomach. You'll be dangerous someday, she said. If you learn how not to care. He looked at her then, really looked, how her smile masked something tired, how she dressed like a woman playing adult games in a town too small for them. You don't do relationships, do you? Only with sunsets. And boys who'll leave soon anyway. Elias chuckled. Then I'm exactly your type. They met a few more times before he left for university. No strings. Just heat and quiet understanding. Lisbon, first-year university. Lisbon was grey and thrilling. Elias lived in a shared flat with 3 other students and worked part-time at a tech shop to make ends meet. But it wasn't enough. He'd learned early that attention opened doors. At the university library, he caught the eye of older women, art patrons, divorcees, visiting professors. He sharpened his charm like a blade. That's how he met Beatriz Vasconcelos. Beatriz. She was 51. Elegant. Sharp. A widow of a telecom magnate and quietly infamous among students for sponsoring the deserving. They met at an art exhibition his philosophy professor dragged him to. Beatriz wore black satin gloves and drank white port like it was water. You're wasting in a polytechnic, she said after 20 minutes of conversation. You should be in cybersecurity. I am, Elias replied, half smirking. Just underfunded. She raised an eyebrow. Come to dinner. Their arrangement. Her flat overlooked the Tagus. Their first evening ended with red wine, long debates on Proust, and eventual silence as she pushed him against the hallway wall. Later, in her bed. You're not like the others, she said. You mean I'm not grateful yet? She smiled. No. You're not afraid. That's rare. Should I be? Yes, she said, placing his hand between her thighs. But not tonight. After a few months, Beatrice began paying for his classes, his meals, sometimes his rent. They saw each other regularly, discreetly. Elias knew better than to call it love, it was a transaction. But he learned from her how to dress, how to speak in rooms of power, how to read people like code. After graduation, the job and another pattern. Elias was hired by a Lisbon financial firm within weeks of graduation. He fit in quickly, maybe too quickly. His mind thrived on system logic, packet traces, breach patterns. 1 month, they caught a persistent threat running low-level scripts through a third-party vendor. He and a small team slept at the office for 4 nights, tracking the intrusion across layers of misdirection. We're looking at inside access, said João, a colleague. Whoever's doing this, they knew how to cloak their timestamps. And they speak Portuguese. Elias rubbed his eyes. We should check our printer firmware logs. Last month's push was unsigned. They found it. They closed the breach. The company offered bonuses. Elias didn't go home. The night janitor. Her name was Teresa. She had kind eyes and an old soul. You're the only one still here, she said, pushing a mop. I like the quiet. You also like getting paid overtime. Sure. That too. He watched her for a while, then got up from his desk. Want a drink from the vending machine? She tilted her head. Is that how you pick up girls? Free soda. I'm a man of modest charms. She laughed. Show me. They ended up together that night in the break room, half-clothed, her uniform belt undone, him still smelling of recycled air and tired code. She kissed him afterward and asked, Do you ever just sleep? He shook his head. Sleep's too quiet. Always moving, never rooted. Even when he returned to Setúbal later, working part-time with his cousins to digitize the family's fishing logistics, Elias never committed. Not to women, not to faith, not to permanence. He still saw Beatrice sometimes. They had an understanding. But beneath the charm, beneath the seduction and survival, Elias was always walking away, from feelings, from futures, from the idea of being known. Until the dreams began. Until the hidden one called. The world begins to tremble. It began with mirrors. Not all at once, not shattered, just warped. On the morning he returned to Lisbon after a weekend in Setúbal, Elias noticed his reflection at the train station flicker, just a sliver, just a blink, but long enough to freeze him in place. His face remained still, expressionless. But his reflection smiled. He didn't say anything. Didn't scream. Just walked past the glass, heart hammering, chalking it up to stress, lack of sleep. But it didn't stop. At his office, the coffee machine sputtered the moment he approached. The overhead lights dimmed slightly whenever he passed beneath them. Files disappeared from encrypted folders he hadn't even accessed. A light film of salt would crust the corners of his windowpane every morning, despite his desk being far from any open air. The digital world, once his sanctuary, now twitched beneath his fingertips like something alive. He was tracing a network map for a banking client when it happened again. His colleague João stood over his shoulder. Wait, scroll back. That port, 3133, it's closed, but someone's knocking on it. I didn't touch anything, Elias murmured, staring as the screen flickered, glitched, and responded to his unspoken thought. The code changed on its own. The entire map redrew itself, correcting inconsistencies. João frowned. Did you script that? Elias leaned back, slow. No. There was silence. João narrowed his eyes. You're not playing with that AI stuff, right? You're not letting it rewrite systems on the fly. No. Then how the hell? But Elias was already walking away. He couldn't explain it. He didn't want to. He'd stopped believing in God years ago, but now the universe was responding like it knew him. In the elevator. That evening, on his way down to the parking garage, he stepped into the lift alone. The moment the doors closed, the overhead light pulsed. Faintly. Once. Twice. Then the floor indicator froze. The lift didn't move. The air grew thick. And in the stainless steel walls, distorted and faint, he saw them again. Eyes. His own reflection, but not. A version of himself, skin dusted in ash, gold rings gleaming around his pupils, something ancient glowing beneath his ribs like a buried furnace. A voice, low and cold, spoke, but not aloud. Inside. You were marked before birth. You are a gate. The world has forgotten the cost of forgetting. Elias staggered back, heart racing. No, no, this is a panic attack, he whispered. But when he reached for the emergency button, the panel cracked under his touch. Tiny fractures spiderwebbed out from where his finger had pressed, without pressure. The elevator resumed movement as if nothing had happened. The office sink. He rushed to the bathroom. Locked the door. Splashed water on his face. When he looked up, his reflection was normal again. He leaned closer, breathing hard. Then the water began to boil in the sink. He yanked his hand back, watching the porcelain bubble. The pipes beneath groaned, and steam began to rise. He reached into his shirt. His fingers traced the symbol on his chest again, the 7-point flame, now swollen and red. Burning. Who are you? He whispered to no one. Back in his flat. That night, he returned to his small apartment in Alfama. The walls felt too tight. He unrolled the leather-bound journal his father had left him, the one written in half-lost tongues. He flipped past diagrams of astrological gates, maps of underwater cities, fragments of Persian invocations. On the last page, new ink glistened. It hadn't been there yesterday. The gate remembers what the world has buried. The flame has no master, only the hidden one. Elias stared. The words seemed to flicker between languages, Greek, then something older. Pre-Sumerian. Symbols that rearranged themselves as he blinked. He tore the page out in a panic. But his fingers burned. The ink was in his skin now, winding up his arm like serpent script. He stumbled back from his desk, breath ragged. And then he heard it. Outside his window, deep in the narrow street, a whisper on the wind. Awaken. But all of these have broken his mind, if there was any left of it. His reality, perception is warped. Fragments and futures. Lisbon, Alfama district. Elias's apartment. For days after the dream. The flat reeked of old whiskey and dead salt air. Elias sat hunched in his father's cracked leather armchair, bare-chested, a blanket tossed over one shoulder like a forgotten toga. The half-drawn curtains made the daylight jaundiced, and the 3 empty bottles on the table bore witness to a man trying to drown a waking vision. The television flickered with no sound. Fishing reports. Static. Something about incoming weather over the Atlantic. He wasn't in the office. His cousins had called. Left voicemails. He hadn't answered. The cold storage unit needed recalibration. A net had snapped on the coast of Sisimbra. They could handle it. He couldn't. The dreams had come back with searing clarity. The fish. The dagger. The god, the hidden one. And now, the gnawing thought that he wasn't entirely human anymore. Am I mad? He whispered to the empty room. Have I finally broken like a bone gone too long without pressure? He stood slowly, almost drunkenly, and stared at his reflection in the living room mirror. The golden ring in his pupils shimmered faintly, even in the dim light. The flame-shaped mark on his chest pulsed once, like a heartbeat. He laughed bitterly. Of course. Why not a bloody sigil, too? And then... knock knock. He stiffened. For a moment, he thought it might be one of them, the watchers, the man from the docks. But the knock came again, lighter. Familiar. He opened the door. Lucia. Hair in a messy braid, oversized hoodie, leggings, and holding 2 bags, one with food, the other suspiciously resembling a new DNA kit. Her nose scrunched. You smell like a dying pirate. Elias grunted and stepped aside, letting her in. That's generous. I'd say I smell like a dead one. She dropped the bags on the table, looked around at the mess, and sighed. This is worse than I thought. Welcome to my divine breakdown, he said, collapsing back into the chair. Didn't think a saliva sample would lead to spiritual ruin, did you? She didn't answer at first. Just walked over and crouched beside him, placing a warm hand on his shoulder. Hey, she said softly. Whatever this is, you're not crazy. You're just going through something. I saw a god in the ocean, Lucia, he said, voice frayed. Not in a dream. Not in some high on mushrooms hallucination. It was real. I felt him. She paused, brushing hair from his temple. Even if that's true, you're still Elias. The man who builds firewall systems while flirting with janitors. He smirked, weakly. Flirting? I was consoling her after a rough mop shift. Lucia laughed, then leaned in and kissed him lightly on the lips. Get up, pirate. You need a bath. 2 hours later, outdoor cafe by the river. Elias was clean-shaven, in a black pullover and dark jeans, hair still damp. He looked like a man again, not a myth unraveling. Lucia set her tablet on the table as they finished lunch. "You ready to see our virtual offspring?" she asked, half mocking. Elias raised a brow. "Should I be?" She tapped the screen and turned it to him. "This is based on your first sample and mine. We ran the phenotype expressions, estimated averages, and ran virtual synthesis simulations. On screen, a curly-haired child with dark skin and Elias's unmistakable nose." Lucia swiped. A version with greenish eyes appeared. Then one with a boy's frame. Then a girl at 5 years old. 10. "You really went all in," he murmured. "I thought you'd appreciate the science. And maybe the intimacy of it." Elias leaned back. "They're beautiful. But—" He narrowed his eyes. "The labs had trouble with your DNA," she admitted, chewing her lip. "Your sequencing has unusual markers. Repeats. Missing alleles in certain standard positions. The technicians can't parse sections of it using conventional models." Elias tensed. "You think I'm some mutant?" "I think you're either a very rare outlier," she said, watching him carefully, "or something old is hiding in your code. Some ancestry or lineage that doesn't match modern databases." She hesitated. "We'd like to try again. New samples. Maybe more material for extended runs and theoretical manipulation models." His brow furrowed. "Manipulation. Not actual embryos, just modeling," she said quickly. "No surrogates, no test tubes. Just simulations." He stared at her, quiet. "Lucia? You're not secretly trying to mother a god baby without telling me, right?" She burst out laughing. "God, no. I'm not even ready for a puppy. I'm not trying to trap you, Elias. It's just curiosity. Data. Nothing real." He relaxed slightly. "Fine," he said. "But if you want another sample, you'll have to get it yourself." She leaned forward, eyes glinting. "Deal." They clinked glasses again. She grinned. "To science." He smiled back. "To temptation. The fire within the genome." Elias's flat, that night until dawn. The candlelight flickered against the old brick walls. Elias leaned back on his elbows, breathless, watching as Lucia reached across the bed for the cooler. Her hair fell across her face, the curve of her back glistening with sweat. She retrieved a capped test tube from the nightstand, handling it with the casualness of a woman who had done this before, or maybe she was just that unbothered by taboo. "This makes it 3, she murmured, placing the filled vial into the portable cryobox packed with dry ice. The vapor hissed around her fingers as she sealed the lid. He chuckled hoarsely, chest rising and falling. "You treat this like a clinical trial." "It is a clinical trial," she teased, crawling back into bed beside him. "You're just the world's most charming specimen." "Specimen," he repeated, rolling to face her. "Now I feel objectified." She kissed him lightly. "You are very much appreciated, objectified or not." He smirked and stretched. "We've gone 3 times, Lucia." 4, she corrected, with a wicked glint in her eyes. "I should be dead," Elias muttered, staring at the ceiling. "There's no way I should still be ready." Lucia raised a brow, then reached under the blanket. He twitched. "Still are," she whispered. "You're like some goddamn fertility statue." That made him pause. Her hand rested on his chest, right over the faint mark. She traced it lazily. "You still don't remember where this came from?" He shook his head. "It wasn't a tattoo. It's not burned. I didn't carve it. It just appeared." You've been different since that night, she said softly. Not just brooding. There's energy in you. Power. Elias looked at her, uncertain. You think I'm possessed or something? No, she whispered. But I think something's waking up in you. Maybe something ancient. He looked away. Then let's hope I use it for more than sex and brooding. She laughed and curled beside him, wrapping her arms around his waist. They lay together as the light changed from candle to dawn. Outside, Lisbon stirred slowly, fishermen beginning their routines, vendors calling out in the alleys. Inside, the room was quiet save for their breathing. Eventually, they both dozed. The next day, late morning. Sunlight broke through the gauzy curtains. Elias stood at the stove in loose cotton pants, hair damp from a shower, making coffee. The whiskey bottles were gone, thrown into the bin. His place smelled of soap and sunlight. Lucia emerged wearing his oversized shirt, stretching, her limbs cat-like. You look sane, she said, eyeing him. I feel like myself again, he said, pouring coffee into two mismatched mugs. Maybe better. She took the cup with a grateful hum and sat at the table, glancing at her sealed cooler beside her laptop bag. I'm going to run the new samples today. Take them straight to the lab. I'd say good luck, he said, sipping. But I have a feeling this time, the data's going to scream. You think you'll light up the genome charts like a flare? I think something's inside me that doesn't belong to any known tree of life, he said evenly. She nodded, eyes thoughtful. Whatever it is, I want to see it. He studied her. You're not afraid. Are you? He took a breath. Not anymore. They stood quietly for a moment. Then he grabbed his coat and keys. Back to the docks, he said. My cousin's probably threatening to sell my boat by now. And I'm back to the lab, she said, holding up the cooler like a treasure chest. I'll let you know what the machines find. She kissed him once on the lips, soft, not hungry, something closer to grateful. Then she walked out the door with the sunrise behind her. Elias stood in the quiet afterward, watching the ripple of sunlight across the harbor from his window. There was still fire in him. But for the first time, it didn't scare him. It felt like purpose.